I've been craving this next recipe for so long, so you can imagine how much it hurt when I found out that it is so exclusive that it can only be found in one city, Tampa, Florida. When I was in Tampa, I spent a lot of time in Ybor City. I remember leaving class, going to a Cuban bakery to get lunch, getting myself a nice Cubano, and then looking past the counter, seeing a warming box filled with these deep golden brown football-shaped croquettes filled with crab meat. In Tampa, more specifically Ybor, in the Cuban community, they're called deviled crabs. When you ordered one, they only cost like $1 or $2. I don't know how they did it. They'd squeeze a little sriracha right in the middle, put it in a bag, send you on your way. It was the best $1 or $2 snack that you could find, and that is what we're making today, so don't go anywhere. I will say this recipe does take a little bit of time, but I guarantee you it is well worth it, and it's gonna be a lot faster than flying to Tampa to get one of these, plus you don't have to be in Florida, so it's win-win. The first part of this recipe you can easily do the day before. Leave it in the fridge, take it out in the next morning, split your time in half, and you're good to go. Now, typical croquettes in Spain use potatoes as the main ingredient with a filling on the inside. In Tampa, Cuban bread is king, and you can tell I've got a bunch of bread here. So I have some regular sandwich bread, which is stale, and then I also have some, it's not really Cuban bread, but it's the closest I could find, also stale. This is gonna make that outer layer of our croquette. You wanna make sure your bread is stale. If it's not and you have fresh bread, just turn the oven on 250 degrees, put your bread on a sheet pan, let it sit in there for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then you have nice stale bread. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is cut the crust off of all of our sandwich bread, just so you have the nice fluffy inside. Back in Tampa in the 20s, Florida blue crabs were very abundant, and Cuban bread is a super cheap staple food, so it was only a matter of time before someone combined the two. So now we've got all the crust cut off our sandwich bread. Make sure to shuffle it up real nice. There we go. And I would not be doesn't pay full price if I didn't tell you to save these crusts. These will make great croutons. Cut these up into cubes, toss them with some olive oil, salt, pepper, put them in an oven, 350 degrees for 10 minutes or so, and you've got perfect homemade croutons. We're essentially making a dough out of this bread, which was already a dough at some point, but a different dough, different kind of dough. Take your bread, tear it up into pieces, put it in a nice big bowl. It doesn't have to be any kind of rhyme or reason, just tear it up, break it up, do whatever you want. Then we're gonna cover this with water. This is about 8 or 10 slices of bread. I've got 2 cups of water. I'm gonna add 1 cup first, let it sit, mix it all together, and then add the other cup of water. Then we're gonna let this sit for at least 30 minutes. We've got this bread soaking. I'm gonna set it aside for now and break out a little food processor, and we're gonna deal with this Cuban bread. Just break your bread up into chunks that fit in the food processor. We're just gonna pulse this until it's super fine. You may have to do this in a couple batches, so just have a separate container ready to dump this out and put the next loaf in. You're looking for something just like this. It's like a fine, soft breadcrumb. We have our dough working, so let's get that out of the way and get started on our filling. So for the filling, along with the crab meat, we're essentially gonna be making a sofrito, which is kind of like mirepoix, but in Spanish cooking. So instead of carrot, celery, and onion, garlic, peppers, and then typically like a tomato-y base. I've got an onion, a few cloves of garlic, a poblano pepper. You could use a regular bell pepper, I just like a little heat. And then I've got some roasted red peppers. We could chop these up the normal way, but I mean, since you already have the food processor out, we're just gonna throw everything in there and blend it up. Go ahead and smash up 3 or 4 cloves of garlic, throw them in the food processor. I like to use a big chunk of roasted red pepper. Maybe a couple chunks, throw that in there. Don't forget all the quantities for everything are gonna be in the description below, so don't forget to check that out. I think half this poblano pepper is probably good. Just give it a little chop, throw that in there. Then 1 whole yellow onion, sans skins, and then I like to just cut it into quarters just so it's easier to process. Then just blend it up. Then what you're left with is the base of most Spanish cuisine, a nice sofrito. This stuff smells really good too. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know why I don't make this more often. Next up, turn a burner onto medium heat, and then in your favorite pan, add about a tablespoon of olive oil. You could use some of the good stuff for this, and then just give it about a minute or 2 to come up to temperature. Then once the pan's ready, we're gonna add our sofrito. We're gonna saute this for just about 5 minutes or so. Nice and slow, we're just looking to sweat those veggies out a little bit, cook them down. Then we're gonna start adding some stuff. So I've got 2 bay leaves, right to the pot, half a teaspoon of sugar. I'm gonna use about half of one of these little cans of tomato paste. then we're gonna add about half a cup of water. I'm also gonna add a couple hefty pinches of salt. I like a little paprika, just a couple sprinkles, maybe like a half teaspoon, maybe a little bit more. Then just a little pinch of oregano, and then just a little bit of your good old Louisiana hot sauce. Make sure to break everything up, stir it all in, get it all incorporated. Then I'm gonna turn the heat down to low, cover it with a lid, and then just let this simmer, let all these flavors develop for like 5 or 10 minutes. We're on to the next step now. Step 3 or 4 or whatever. You remember that bread that we had soaking? Well, it's been about 30 minutes. So you could put this in a tea towel and wring it out, or you could get yourself a strainer. You could try to squeeze the extra moisture out, but I find that it doesn't work that well. So I'm gonna put it into a sieve, just like this, and then just kind of push down and work some of that extra moisture out. You can see it coming out right there. You don't want it to be like soaking wet. So give it a couple minutes, wring out whatever moisture you can, and then we'll go on to making our dough. We've got a little bit of moisture out of our dough. If you use the right amount of water, it's not really that big of an issue. If you go over 1.5 cups, 2 cups, then you might have a problem, but get all of our soaked bread back into the bowl. Then we're gonna take our Cuban bread that we had processed, and then just slowly add a little bit. This is gonna be kind of gross. You're gonna have to use your hands, but you know what? It's part of the deal. And we're just gonna mix it in with this soaked bread till it forms a nice dough. See how it's forming a ball? That is exactly what you want. I might even try to use all of these. As you can see, our dough came together really well. It's forming a ball. It's beautiful, but as it sits right now, it's just bread and water. Not a whole lot going on in the flavor department. So before we wrap this up, we gotta add some flavor to it. So I'm gonna pound it out a little bit, and then I've got about a teaspoon, teaspoon and a half of kosher salt, and then just some paprika, good amount of paprika, maybe about a teaspoon, teaspoon and maybe 2 teaspoons. We're just gonna mix this together one last time, make sure all the salt, all the spices are mixed all the way through the dough. I'm gonna cover this, throw it in the fridge. You could go overnight, but I would say no less than 2 hours. You want this nice and cold when we go to work with it. Now we're back to the filling. I've got 2 6-ounce cans of crab meat. Now don't bother springing for the good stuff. Don't get the jumbo lump. You're not really gonna taste the difference. This is gonna be all cooked together. That's sofrito. So save yourself a few bucks, get the canned stuff. We're gonna drain out as much liquid as possible and then add this right to the sofrito. And we're gonna cover this one last time, cook it for another 5 to 10 more minutes, just until there's almost no moisture left in this at all. We wanna cook out most of that moisture so it's not inside the croquette when we stuff it. After another 5 or 10 minutes, you can see there's not really much liquid left in the bottom of the pan. We're gonna get this out of the pan into a container, and we're gonna let this cool for at least an hour, or you could go overnight. When we start to make these, I like to just wet my hands just a little bit. You can make these as big or as small as you want. I feel like when I was in Tampa, they made them pretty big, so I'm gonna take a dough ball that's almost the size of a clementine, press it out as thin as possible with your hand. This is why I like using wet hands, so these don't stick. This is the real deal size that I remember getting. This is gonna be about 4 or 5 inches in diameter. Then we're gonna put a good tablespoon and a half right in the middle. Kind of stretch it out into a little football shape. Then close it up as best you can. If you wanna do it on the cutting board, it's fine. I like to just pinch the tops like this, then pinch the sides, kind of like you're making I don't know, like an empanada. And you should get this little football shape. Then, just to make sure it's sealed, give it a little roll on the counter. Make sure you don't have any holes, and then put it right on your sheet pan. Once you've got all of your deviled crabs done, we could bread them right now, but I kind of want to harden these up a little bit so they don't fall apart while we're breading them. So you can throw these in the fridge for at least 2 hours, or I'm gonna pop these in the freezer for about an hour. After about an hour in the freezer, these things are nice and solid and they'll hold together fine. You don't want them to be totally frozen, you just want to solidify the outside just a little bit. So these are perfect and they're ready for our breading. So now we're ready to set up our classic breading station, which consists of all-purpose flour, an egg wash, and then our breadcrumbs. These I just seasoned with a little bit of salt. You could use seasoned breadcrumbs too, that totally works. Before we bread these though, we're gonna get a heavy-sided saucepan, fill it up halfway with some vegetable oil. You never wanna fill it more than halfway because then you risk boiling over, and if you boil over, you're gonna have a bad time. I'm gonna get this over to the stove onto medium heat. We've got our breading station all set up, and we're gonna go flour, egg wash, breadcrumbs, and then right back onto the sheet pan until we're ready to fry. Once you've got all of your deviled crabs fully breaded, now these are ready for the fryer. As is the rule whenever we're frying anything, we've got everything set up along the way, including our ingredients to be fried, some kind of utensil to get the said ingredients out of the oil. We've got our oil, which is nice and hot, and then we have our draining rig, which consists of a sheet pan with an upside down cooling rack and then a paper towel to catch any grease and any drippings. And then on this side here, we've got any kind of seasonings that you may want, because you're gonna wanna season it while it's hot. So I've got some salt. I might use some of this Red Lobster seafood seasoning, but everything's ready to go, and now we're ready to fry. Since these are kind of big, I like to fry them one at a time, maybe two at a time if your pot's big enough, but you don't want to overcrowd these. So just take it easy at first. Remember, whenever you're frying, you want to lay things in away from you. And then these are totally submerged. They don't take very long, maybe 5 minutes or so. Just wait until they're nice and dark and golden brown. After a few minutes, almost the color of a really deep corn dog. Look at that. Move these quickly to the cooling rack, where we're gonna hit them with just a little bit of salt right on top. If you feel frisky, you can add a little bit of seafood seasoning to it. After just a couple minutes, you have plenty of these babies piping hot and ready to go. Traditionally, these are just thrown into a bag and it's a snack that you just eat on the go. But if you want to, you can plate it up. The one thing you do not want to forget though is when you get these, they also always have sriracha and they squirt it right on the inside. If you're eating it as a hand snack, just literally poke the tip of the sriracha bottle right in the middle, squeeze it in, and you're good to go. Or you could just drizzle it right on top of the plate. All right, it took a little bit of time, but I told you it would be worth it. Look at how good that looks. Look at that. Super crispy outer shell, amazing crab meat on the inside. If you've ever wanted a crab cake that you could eat on the go, this right here is it. The best part about this is that each one of these deviled crabs only cost me this much to make. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. It helps my videos out a whole bunch. Tell your friends, subscribe. I'm Jim with Doesn't Pay Full Price, and I'll see you next time. Cheers. So good.